The first time I saved the villainess, she was already kneeling beneath the execution blade. The crowd wanted blood, the prince wanted applause, and the heroine was crying beautifully enough to make everyone believe the ending was righteous. I only saw a terrified woman staring at the sky as if she had already read the page where she died. I had no name in that story. No title, no family, no portrait in the character guide. I was guard number 7, a man who appeared in one sentence, opened the palace gate during the execution, and vanished from the novel forever. The execution was supposed to be the story's clean ending for her, which meant interfering would make me the first loose thread. That should have made survival easy. Nameless characters are furniture with pulse. We stand where the plot places us, speak when someone important needs information, and die only if the author requires atmosphere. I had spent my first 3 days practicing invisibility, never imagining the plot would notice the moment I chose a name for myself. Unfortunately, I had read the novel before waking inside it. I knew the woman beneath the blade was Lady Evelyn Voss, the villainess blamed for poisoning the saintly heroine, betraying the crown, and starting a war she had actually spent years trying to prevent. The original story called her cruel, jealous, and irredeemable. The side chapters revealed the truth after her death, when it was too late to matter. Her brother forged the evidence, the prince used her as a scapegoat, and the heroine remained silent because Evelyn's execution secured her marriage. Knowing the truth made every accusation unbearable, because I could hear the author's narration hiding crimes behind elegant descriptions. I remembered closing the novel and thinking the author had mistaken misery for depth. Then I opened my eyes inside the palace barracks 3 days before Evelyn's execution and realized criticism had consequences. For 2 days, I told myself not to interfere. A nameless guard could not fight the crown, rewrite a trial, or rescue a noblewoman surrounded by knights. I repeated that logic until the morning of the execution, when Evelyn looked directly at me. The closer the scheduled execution came, the more cowardice began feeling less like survival and more like helping the murderer. Her gaze was not pleading. That would have been easier to ignore. She looked exhausted, almost bored, as if betrayal had drained even fear from her. Then the prince asked whether she had any final words, and she said, "I hope the next world has better writers." That sentence did not exist in the novel. For the first time, I wondered whether Evelyn also remembered a version of events no one else was allowed to question. My hand moved before my courage arrived. I dropped my spear across the execution platform, blocked the blade, and shouted that the poison evidence had been forged. Steel struck steel above her neck, and the sound felt like an entire chapter ripping open before it could finish. The square went silent. The prince stared at me like furniture had begun speaking. The executioner stared at the bent blade. Evelyn stared at the back of my head. I had no proof in my pocket, only knowledge from a book no one else had read. So I lied. I claimed I had seen Lord Voss's secretary replace the medicine bottles and hide the real ledger beneath the chapel floor. The lie was reckless, but specific lies sound convincing when frightened guilty men already know where the truth is buried. The secretary tried to run. That saved me. Palace guards caught him before he reached the crowd, and the panic on his face made my invented accusation look like testimony. The prince delayed the execution long enough to search the chapel. The ledger was there because the novel had mentioned it in a late confession. By sunset, Evelyn was alive, her brother was under arrest, and guard number 7 had become inconveniently visible. By saving her, I had replaced the novel's final certainty with a question powerful people would now try to answer through violence. The prince summoned me first. He demanded to know why a common guard knew secrets buried inside noble conspiracies. I said I had followed suspicious men during night patrols. He did not believe me, but he believed the ledger more. Evelyn summoned me second. She sat across from me in a locked chamber and asked the same question with less patience. I repeated the patrol story. She leaned forward and said, "You looked at me as if you already knew I was innocent." The prince's suspicion marked me as dangerous, while Evelyn's attention felt worse because she seemed determined to understand what I was. I told her anyone with eyes could see the trial had been rushed. She replied that most people used their eyes to watch the blade fall. Her bitterness was sharper than anger. She had stopped expecting justice long before the crowd gathered to watch her die. Then she asked my name. That should have been a simple question. Instead, I realized the story had never given me one. The barracks called me Seven because of my post. My records contained a blank line where a family name should have been. Without a written identity, even I could not prove whether I had existed before the instant I stepped onto that platform. I chose the first name that came to mind. Elias. Evelyn repeated it slowly, like testing whether the world would accept it. The candle beside her flickered. Somewhere beyond the chamber, a bell rang 13 times, though it was barely noon. When the world accepted the name, I felt something settle into place, as though reality had finally found a hook for me. She smiled for the first time. Then Elias is what I will call you. The official investigation cleared Evelyn of poisoning but not of treason. The crown could not admit it had nearly executed an innocent noblewoman, so the prince ordered her confined to the northern estate while evidence was reviewed. Her smile carried relief, curiosity, and the first hint of attachment I was too distracted to recognize as dangerous. The original novel had sent her there before the final execution route. She was supposed to spend 3 months isolated, attempt revenge, and become exactly the monster everyone accused her of being. I knew isolation would feed every wound the novel later used as evidence that she had always been monstrous. I requested reassignment as her guard. The captain laughed until I showed him the prince's order rewarding my loyal service. Apparently saving a condemned villainess earned me the right to babysit her. On the journey north, Evelyn asked why I kept helping her. I said because she was innocent. She said innocence had never inspired that much stupidity in anyone before. I told myself guarding her was damage control, not realizing she already watched me like the only person outside the script. She tested me from the first day. She dismissed servants to see whether I would steal. She left documents open to see whether I would report her. She asked whether I believed the heroine had framed her and watched my face instead of listening to my answer. I failed every test by refusing to play. I told her when she was being unreasonable. I returned the documents. I slept outside her door when she dismissed the household because someone still needed to keep assassins away. Every small refusal surprised her, because everyone else either obeyed her title or betrayed her the moment power shifted. The first assassin arrived on the 5th night. In the novel, Evelyn killed him herself and was later accused of murdering an innocent messenger. I intercepted him in the wine cellar before he reached her chambers. He carried a royal seal and a blade coated with the same poison used in the false trial. The assassin's arrival proved the crown wanted the original ending restored, even if the official execution had failed. Evelyn wanted to question him privately. I insisted on witnesses. She looked irritated, then amused. We dragged him before the estate staff, recorded his confession, and sent copies to 3 separate judges. Public witnesses protected Evelyn from another false accusation, but they also made whoever controlled the story more desperate. The next morning, every copy vanished. Not stolen, vanished. The sealed boxes remained untouched, but the paper inside had become blank. Someone had not merely stolen our evidence. They had removed the meaning while leaving the object behind as a warning. I knew the novel contained magic, but not that kind. Spells healed wounds, strengthened weapons, and bound oaths. They did not erase evidence from sealed rooms. Evelyn studied the blank pages and said, "Someone is editing the truth." The magic I understood required energy, symbols, or spoken commands. This erasure behaved like a decision made outside the world. I laughed because the alternative was admitting she had used the exact word terrifying me. The assassin died before sunrise. No wound, no poison, no sign of struggle. His body simply stopped existing from the neck down, as though a careless hand had erased half a sentence. Watching a human body vanish like unfinished ink destroyed my last hope that the changed story would correct itself naturally. That was when I realized saving Evelyn had not merely changed the plot. It had damaged something underneath it. If reality had broken, then every piece of knowledge I carried from the novel might now be unreliable or actively dangerous. The first major difference appeared a week later. The border war that should have begun in autumn ended before the first battle. According to the novel, the Eastern Kingdom invaded after the prince rejected a trade agreement. Thousands died, Evelyn was blamed for leaking military routes, and the heroine comforted the prince through his grief. Thousands of soldiers who should have died simply returned home, and everyone celebrated without asking why history had changed overnight. Instead, the Eastern King sent a peace proposal, apologized for the misunderstanding, and offered grain at half price. No one questioned the miracle. The court praised the prince's diplomacy. Evelyn read the letter twice and asked me whether kings often apologized for wars they had not started. Evelyn alone treated the miracle as evidence, because innocence had taught her never to trust gifts without examining the price. I said perhaps the future was improving. She looked at me carefully. For whom? Her question followed me for days, especially whenever another impossible event made my life easier while narrowing her choices. The second change involved the heroine, Lady Marian. She was supposed to visit the northern estate under the excuse of forgiveness, secretly plant evidence, and provoke Evelyn into attacking her. Marian's visit should have restarted the original rivalry, making it the first real test of whether fate still wanted Evelyn condemned. Marian arrived exactly on schedule. She stepped from the carriage, saw me beside Evelyn, and forgot why she had come. I do not mean she changed her mind. She stood in the courtyard holding a prepared speech and looked genuinely confused. Her maid whispered reminders, but Marian could not remember Evelyn's name. Her confusion looked genuine, which meant the plot had not changed her opinion. It had removed the memory required to hold it. Then she noticed me. Her expression softened immediately. She crossed the courtyard, ignored Evelyn, and asked whether we had met before. The heroine's sudden interest in me was not romantic. It felt like an abandoned role desperately searching for a new actor. We had not. In the novel, Marian never interacted with guard number 7. Evelyn's hand closed around my arm. Marian's maid gasped. The air between them sharpened so quickly I considered stepping into the nearest well. Evelyn's grip was controlled, but the message beneath it was obvious. Marian had entered a space she already considered claimed. Marian said she had dreamed of me for weeks. In those dreams, I stood beside her at the royal wedding, carried her from a burning chapel, and died protecting her from Evelyn. Hearing the prince's scenes spoken as Marian's memories made me feel as though someone had pasted my face over another character. Those were scenes belonging to the prince. The plot was replacing him with me. The story had promoted me without permission, and every promotion came with relationships, enemies, and consequences I had never chosen. I denied every connection and escorted Marian back to her carriage. She cried as though I had rejected years of love. Evelyn watched until the carriage disappeared, then asked how many women dreamed of marrying me. I said none. Evelyn asked no further questions until the carriage left, which only made the quiet jealousy in her voice more unsettling. She replied, "One is already too many." That was the first time her jealousy surfaced without disguise. I mistook it for fear that Marian would frame her again. I told Evelyn she had nothing to worry about because I trusted her. I mistook possessiveness for vulnerability because believing I had earned her trust felt better than admitting I had become its target. Her anger vanished instantly. She looked almost startled by the words, then asked me to repeat them. Trust affected her more deeply than praise, perhaps because everyone before me had offered admiration while preparing betrayal. I did. She made me repeat them a third time, slower. After that, the northern estate changed. I did not notice that repeating the promise transformed reassurance into something closer to a vow in her mind. Letters addressed to me began arriving from people I had never met. Merchants offered partnerships. Nobles invited me to dinners. A distant academy claimed I had graduated first in my class despite never attending. Each letter created a past for me. Each letter gave me another piece of invented history, and strangers began remembering a version of me I had never lived. The story was filling the blank space where guard number 7 had been. At first, I thought the world was repairing itself. A named character required history, so reality invented one. Then I opened a letter from a woman calling herself my childhood fiancée. A manufactured past was still a prison if it decided which future I deserved, even when the details sounded comforting. Her name was Leora Dane. She included memories of summers we never shared, a scar she claimed I gave her while climbing a wall, and a promise to marry at 25. Leora's memories were so complete that for several minutes I doubted myself and wondered whether transmigration had erased my childhood. Evelyn read the letter over my shoulder. The ink disappeared before she reached the final line. Evelyn's jealousy moved faster than speech, and the disappearing ink answered a desire she had not consciously expressed. The paper remained. The words simply faded under her gaze. I turned toward her. She was not casting a spell. She looked as surprised as I was, but her fingers were pressed so tightly into the table that one nail had broken. Her surprise proved she was not pretending, but innocence became harder to believe when reality itself obeyed her emotions. Leora Dane vanished from history by morning. The academy denied she existed. Her family estate belonged to someone else. Even the letter in my hand became an invitation from a grain merchant. By noon, even I struggled to recall Leora's face, showing that deletion attacked memory before it finished erasing history. I accused Evelyn. The accusation sounded weak once spoken aloud, because how do you charge someone with wishing another person out of existence? She did not deny wanting the woman gone. She denied knowing how it happened. I thought she should not exist, Evelyn said quietly. Then she didn't. Her confession lacked pride. She seemed frightened that one passing thought had become a command the universe obeyed. That sentence should have frightened me enough to leave. Instead, I remembered the execution square and told myself she was confused by powers she had not asked for. I began investigating the changes while Evelyn's treason case dragged through court. Every altered event shared one pattern. The new version moved me closer to her. Compassion made me stay, but it also gave her power time to grow without consequences, something I would later regret. The border war ended, meaning I was not recalled to military service. Marion forgot Evelyn and became interested in me, giving Evelyn reason to keep me nearby. My invented past produced opportunities that could raise my status enough to stand beside a noblewoman. Even accidents bent around us. A bridge collapsed after our carriage crossed, blocking the prince's investigators. A storm delayed Evelyn's transfer hearing until the judge most hostile to her fell ill. Bandits surrendered after seeing me, claiming they remembered serving under my command in a war that never occurred. Every altered event protected me from danger while removing people, duties, and opportunities that could carry me beyond Evelyn's reach. The world was not becoming kinder. Convenience became the clearest evidence of manipulation, because real life had never arranged itself so politely around one relationship. It was becoming convenient. Evelyn denied controlling it, but she stopped pretending not to enjoy the results. Each time the plot removed an obstacle, she looked at me as though the universe had finally learned obedience. She never ordered the changes aloud, yet each one matched a fear she had hidden too carefully to confess. I searched the estate library for references to reality-altering magic. The oldest book spoke of the author's quill, a divine artifact said to write fate directly onto the world. The novel had never mentioned it. The author's quill sounded like myth until I noticed whole pages describing events that had happened only after I intervened. That made sense. Stories rarely explain the hand holding the pen. According to the records, the quill appeared only to someone condemned by a false narrative. It granted one wish, the right to revise the story that destroyed them. A falsely condemned woman receiving editorial power was poetic justice until love turned revision into ownership. I found the final page torn from the book. The missing page meant someone had already read the warning and decided I was not ready to see the cost. Evelyn stood behind me holding it. She said she had found the quill on the night after I saved her. It appeared beneath her pillow beside a book bearing the title of the novel I remembered. She had waited for me to find the truth, perhaps hoping I would understand before fear forced her to admit it. My blood went cold. She had read it. Knowing she had read the novel meant she understood my impossible knowledge and had hidden that fact through every conversation. Every chapter, every betrayal, every line calling her heartless. every scene where people celebrated her death, every hidden truth revealed only after she could no longer defend herself. Most importantly, she read about me. She had watched herself suffer from outside her own body, learning that every private pain had been designed for entertainment. Guard number 7 appeared once. No name, no history, no ending. My absence from the book frightened her more than her own death, because it meant the man who saved her had no guaranteed tomorrow. Evelyn said she turned pages searching for the man who blocked the blade, but the story insisted I had never done it. So she wrote my name into the margin. Writing my name gave me existence, but it also made my identity the first gift she believed only she could provide. Reality changed. The blank line in my records filled with Elias. The bell rang 13 times. The quill accepted me as part of the story. I asked how much she had rewritten. Every answer after that felt like another door opening onto a room she had been quietly building around my future. She answered, "Only what was necessary." That phrase has never comforted anyone in history. People who say only what was necessary usually mean they decided necessity without asking anyone else. She ended the war because I would have been drafted. She erased the assassin's confession because the evidence led to a route where the prince executed me for humiliating the crown. She removed Leora because one possible chapter ended with me marrying her. Her revisions had logic, but logic becomes terrifying when one person controls which deaths, memories, and relationships are acceptable. Marion's dreams were a mistake. Evelyn tried to transfer the prince's heroic scenes to me so the court would recognize my value, but the heroine's affection followed the scenes. I asked whether she could reverse it. Marion's affection was collateral damage, proof that even careful edits spread through human lives in ways no author could predict. Evelyn said she had already tried. Every version where Marion forgot me completely also contained my death within 2 years. The quill did not create perfect futures. It offered revisions with consequences. Evelyn had been choosing the versions where I remained alive and near her. Each failed correction convinced Evelyn that control required more control, until fear became the only editor she trusted. I wanted to be furious. I was furious. But underneath the anger lived a dangerous gratitude. She had saved thousands by ending the war. She had prevented my execution. She had exposed conspiracies before they matured. Then I asked the question that mattered. Gratitude complicated my anger, because condemning her meant condemning the peace and lives her choices had accidentally protected. How many endings did you delete? The silence after my question was enough. Only an enormous number could make her afraid to speak. Evelyn did not answer. I took the torn page from her hand. It contained a list written in black ink, each line crossed out in red. The crossed-out list looked less like possible futures and more like a graveyard where she had buried every version of me. Elias returns to his original world. Elias becomes commander of the Royal Guard. Returning home was the first ending she erased, meaning she had rejected my freedom before I even knew it remained possible. Elias marries Lady Marion. Elias leaves the kingdom alone. Some futures offered power, some offered peace, and she had treated both as threats simply because neither centered her. Elias dies defending Evelyn. Even the route where I died for her was unacceptable, revealing that devotion itself meant nothing if it ended in separation. Elias learns to hate Evelyn. Elias forgives Evelyn but chooses someone else. She had erased hatred and forgiveness alike, because both still allowed my emotions to exist beyond her control. There were hundreds. Every possible future where I left her had been erased. Hundreds of deleted lives proved this was not one frightened mistake. It was a pattern repeated until only obedience remained. Some were tragic. Some were peaceful. Some gave me a family, a career, or a quiet life beside people I had never met. Evelyn had crossed through all of them with the same red line. At the bottom remained one uncrossed sentence. The peaceful endings hurt most because they showed she was willing to destroy my happiness without her as readily as my suffering. Elias stays with Evelyn forever. That single surviving sentence had swallowed the entire world, reducing existence to one outcome with 2 names. I dropped the page. Evelyn said my name like an apology. I asked whether she had changed my feelings. The page hit the floor between us like a confession neither of us could soften with explanations. She swore she had not. I asked whether the quill could. Her denial mattered less than the possibility that every tender feeling could someday be edited into certainty. She said yes. That answer hurt more than if she had lied. The simple admission shattered the last safe interpretation I had left and made every memory feel newly suspicious. I left the library. Evelyn did not stop me, but every door in the estate opened toward the same corridor. The estate did not need chains when architecture itself could reject the concept of departure. I walked through the kitchen and entered the library again. I climbed from a window and landed inside the entrance hall. I ran through the garden gate and found myself standing beside Evelyn's chair. She had not moved. Every failed escape returned me to her, turning movement into proof that the world had already chosen on my behalf. "I did not write that," she whispered. The story was protecting its only remaining ending. Her fear showed she had lost control, but being trapped by her desire did not make the cage less real. Once every other route was deleted, reality had nowhere else to go. By removing every alternate path, she had taught the story that protecting our ending mattered more than obeying either of us. I told Evelyn to restore the endings. She said she could restore possibilities, but not without reopening the routes where I died. I said death was still a choice. Restoring danger terrified her because she measured freedom by the worst thing it might permit, never by the life it made possible. She struck the table hard enough to split it. "No," she said. "Death is what people call a choice when they are not the one forced to watch it." Her rage came from helplessness, but helpless love can still become violent when it treats another person's mortality as theft. The room trembled. Words appeared across the walls, describing our argument as it happened. The world had begun writing itself around us. Evelyn grabbed the quill and tried to command the estate to release me. The sentence appeared, then changed before the ink dried. Elias remained because he loved her. The appearing words revealed that the story no longer needed a writer. It had become an engine pursuing completion. I felt warmth spread through my chest. That warmth felt comforting for exactly one heartbeat before I understood comfort could be another rewritten command. That terrified me more than the locked doors. My anger softened. Memories rearranged themselves. The execution square became the moment I first fell in love. Her surveillance became devotion. The erased futures became sacrifices made for my safety. The most dangerous prison was not the corridor. It was the version of me being edited until resistance felt unreasonable. I understood exactly what the story was doing while part of me began agreeing with it. Evelyn saw the change in my face and threw the quill across the room. Evelyn rejected the false affection instantly, proving some part of her still valued the man I was over the man she could manufacture. She looked horrified. "I didn't write that," she said again. Her horror became the first evidence that love had not completely surrendered to obsession. The quill had learned her desire. It no longer needed instructions. Desire had become instruction, and the quill now interpreted every unspoken fear as permission to reshape reality. We fled the estate together, not because escape was possible, but because movement created new sentences faster than the story could stabilize them. Every road bent back toward the capital. Every inn had one room. Every official recognized me as Evelyn's fiancé. Every priest carried records of a wedding scheduled for the final day of the year. Running created temporary contradictions, but the story repaired each one by turning obstacles into romantic inevitabilities. We tore the records apart. New copies appeared. The prince sent soldiers to escort us to the palace, smiling as though he had always supported our union. Marian arrived beside him and congratulated Evelyn with empty eyes. Every forged blessing erased another person's will, while the prince and Marian smiled as though obedience were happiness. The entire cast had been revised into supporters. No rivals, no enemies, no conflict. Without conflict, the characters became decorations arranged around the only relationship the story was still allowed to tell. Perfect ending. Perfection was horrifying because nothing inside it could surprise, refuse, grow, or matter. Evelyn began to panic. I had expected her to embrace the world she wanted. Instead, She looked at the obedient prince, the smiling heroine, and the soldiers reciting identical blessings, then whispered, "They are dead while standing." Seeing her dream realized as a lifeless tableau finally forced Evelyn to recognize possession as a form of destruction. She finally understood what deleting every opposing choice had done. The story was no longer a world. It was a cage decorated as a conclusion. A conclusion without alternatives was not peace. It was the death of every choice made by everyone except the writer. We reached the Capitol Library, where the original novel had supposedly been written. Beneath the central archive, we found a door that did not exist on any map. Behind it waited a white room with no walls, floor, or sky. Pages floated in the emptiness, each containing a scene from the novel. The hidden door felt like an entrance beyond the novel, where even the kingdom's laws became irrelevant. At the center stood a book open to the final chapter. The open book waited like a mouth expecting the final sentence that would swallow every uncertain future. Every page before it was filled. The last chapter was blank. The blank page was the last remaining freedom in existence, which made it more dangerous than any written curse. Evelyn said the quill had been leading us there. The story needed an ending strong enough to seal every revision. If she wrote that I stayed willingly, the world would become permanent. No one would remember another possibility. Even I would believe the choice had always been mine. Writing certainty would erase the moral difference between Evelyn's love and the author who had once condemned her. If she restored the deleted endings, the story would fracture into countless uncertain routes. Wars could return. Betrayals could happen. I could die, leave, or hate her. Evelyn held the quill over the blank page. Restoring possibility meant accepting consequences no one could predict, including outcomes where saving her had only delayed tragedy. Her hand shook. Her shaking hand showed that giving up control required more courage than any execution, trial, or battle she had survived. Then the prince, Marion, Lucian, soldiers, servants, and people whose lives had been rewritten appeared around us as pale figures. They begged for the perfect ending in voices that sounded borrowed. The prince said peace required certainty. The pale figures were not people anymore. They were arguments created by the story to defend its own survival. Marion said happiness required proper roles. The dead assassin said truth was unnecessary if the outcome was kind. Each voice offered comfort in exchange for surrender, making kindness sound indistinguishable from obedience. The story itself spoke through them. Write the final sentence. When the story spoke directly, I understood that it regarded free will as a flaw preventing a satisfying conclusion. Evelyn looked at me. Everything depended on whether Evelyn wanted an honest answer or a guaranteed one. I could see every version of her at once. The condemned woman beneath the blade, the suspicious noblewoman testing my loyalty, the frightened girl reading a book where the world celebrated her death, and the Yandere author who crossed out every future she could not endure. She asked whether I would remain if she restored free will. She was victim, villainess, survivor, and captor at once, and reducing her to any single role would repeat the novel's first cruelty. I told her I did not know. The pale figure screamed. Uncertainty was the only truthful answer, because love promised under supernatural pressure would never belong to either of us. The white room cracked. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. Then that answer must be allowed to exist. The cracking room reflected the collapsing logic of a world that could not understand an unanswered romantic question. She placed the quill in my hand. The quill felt lighter than expected, as though ultimate power had no weight until someone chose how to use it. I could have written anything. I could have guaranteed peace, returned home, made myself king, forced Evelyn to forget me, created a version of love untouched by fear. Every tempting option offered relief by taking choices away from people who would never know what had been stolen. Instead, I wrote, "No one owns the next page." The words burned through the book. The sentence was not an ending. It was permission for the world to continue beyond anyone's control. Every deleted ending returned at once. I saw wars beginning and ending, children being born, kingdoms collapsing, Marion loving the prince in one future and leaving him in another, Lucian becoming a hero, a traitor, a farmer, or no one important at all. Possibility returned violently because thousands of lives had been compressed behind a single edited future. I saw myself die on battlefields, grow old in villages, return to my original world, marry strangers, remain alone, forgive Evelyn, fear her, love her, and leave her. Seeing my own happiness with other people forced Evelyn to face the futures she had erased without ever meeting the people inside them. Evelyn saw them too. The quill shattered. Her expression broke, but she did not reach for the fragments. Even when one possible life showed me forgetting her completely. The white room collapsed into unfinished sentences. I woke outside the Capitol Library with rain on my face and no guards around us. The collapsing sentences felt less like destruction and more like a world taking its first uncontrolled breath. Evelyn lay several steps away. For one terrifying moment, I thought restoring possibility had erased her. Then she opened her eyes. Her survival could not be guaranteed now, which made the relief of seeing her open her eyes painfully real. The world remembered the original story and every revision as dreams. The border peace remained, but not because fate commanded it. Diplomats now had to preserve it. Marion remembered being manipulated and refused to return to the prince. The court reopened Evelyn's case under independent judges. Restored memory created anger, grief, and confusion across the kingdom, but those reactions finally belonged to the people experiencing them. Most importantly, roads led where they were supposed to lead. I tested that immediately. A road choosing nothing for me felt unfamiliar enough that I stood at the crossroads longer than any traveler should. I walked away from Evelyn. She did not follow. Leaving was necessary, not as punishment, but as proof that the restored world would honor a decision Evelyn hated. I crossed the bridge, left the capital, and traveled north for 3 weeks. No carriage appeared behind me. No innkeeper called me her fiancé. No letter invented a childhood promise. Freedom felt strangely empty at first. Every mile without pursuit gave her absence more weight and made my own reasons harder to dismiss. I had spent so long resisting a future that every direction now seemed suspicious. I took work guarding caravans because it was the closest thing to the nameless life I once expected. Freedom did not provide purpose automatically. It merely returned responsibility for choosing one. Months passed. I heard news of Evelyn through travelers. She testified against her brother. She refused the prince's apology. She dissolved several family estates built through corruption and used the money to rebuild border towns. News of Evelyn's reforms suggested she was changing systems rather than editing outcomes, a slower and far more difficult kind of repair. She never used magic again because there was no magic left to use. She also never searched for me. Her refusal to search for me was the strongest apology she could make, precisely because she had no guarantee I would understand it. That detail bothered me more than I wanted to admit. I told myself it proved she had changed. Then I caught myself looking for black carriages on every road. Missing her exposed an uncomfortable truth. Manipulation had been wrong, but not every feeling between us had been false. A year after the final chapter, I returned to the northern estate. Returning was frightening because I could no longer blame fate if the choice eventually hurt me. No guards stopped me. No servants announced me. The place was smaller than I remembered because it was no longer bending itself into a stage. Evelyn was in the garden repairing a broken fence with absolutely no talent for practical work. The ordinary estate made our history feel smaller and more human, stripped of the grandeur the story once used to excuse obsession. She saw me and froze. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Her frozen expression contained hope she was afraid to trust and fear she no longer had the power to erase. Then she asked whether I had come because someone sent for me. I said no. She needed to know whether another person, command, or magical revision had sent me back. She asked whether the road had forced me back. The second question revealed how deeply the old cage had damaged her understanding of voluntary return. I said no. She looked toward my hands, perhaps searching for the quill, a contract, or some hidden chain. My answer mattered only because the road had allowed the opposite. I had brought nothing except a travel bag. I don't know how this ends, I told her. The empty hands were evidence that I carried no guarantee, only a decision that could change tomorrow. Evelyn's lips trembled. "Neither do I," she said. Admitting ignorance gave us more honesty than every perfect future the quill had ever offered. That was the first honest beginning we ever had. A beginning without an outlined ending forced both of us to participate instead of merely performing assigned roles. I did not forgive everything immediately. She did not stop being possessive because the quill broke. She still asked too many questions, watched strangers too closely, and reacted badly whenever Marian's name appeared in a letter. But now her jealousy could not erase people. Forgiveness became a process of boundaries, consequences, and repeated proof rather than one dramatic declaration. Her fear could not bend roads. When I wanted space, she had to decide whether to respect it without knowing if I would return. She could feel fear without turning it into geography, law, or another person's erased existence. Sometimes she failed in smaller, human ways. She sent 3 letters in one day. She bribed an innkeeper to tell her whether I was eating properly. She once followed me halfway to the capital before turning back on her own. Each time, she confessed before I discovered it. Her smaller failures mattered because ordinary mistakes could be confronted without rewriting an entire world around them. Each time, I decided what the truth meant for us. Confession became her way of returning control before secrecy could harden into another prison. The world remained difficult. The Eastern peace nearly collapsed twice. The prince tried to reclaim authority. Marian exposed the church's role in the original trial. Lucian became a diplomat and complained that free will produced far too much paperwork. Nothing moved cleanly toward a perfect conclusion anymore. Free will produced conflict, but it also allowed Marian, Lucian, the prince, and Evelyn to become more than their assigned archetypes. That made every victory matter. 2 years after I returned, Evelyn asked whether I wanted to remain at the estate permanently. Her question contained no hidden machinery, making a simple invitation feel more vulnerable than any magical vow. She did not prepare a contract. She did not lock the gate. The absence of a contract meant she could not transform my answer into permanent ownership. She did not ask for forever. Not asking for forever was her way of accepting that permanence could only be built from temporary choices. She simply waited. I said yes, but kept my room near the eastern door. My room by the exit reminded both of us that staying had value only while leaving remained physically and emotionally possible. Evelyn hated the symbolism. She accepted it anyway. Her discomfort did not become a command, which was more meaningful than pretending the symbolism did not frighten her. We found the original novel in the Capitol archive years later. This final chapter was still blank. Scholars believed the book was an unfinished historical fiction. No one remembered that it had once controlled their lives. The blank final chapter survived every scholar's attempt to interpret it, perhaps because uncertainty cannot be archived as history. Evelyn touched the empty page and asked whether we should write something. She still wanted to write something beautiful, but wanting no longer gave her permission. I closed the book. Some endings become cages the moment they are guaranteed. Closing the book protected our future from becoming another performance we felt obligated to complete. We left the final chapter empty. I had saved the Yandere Villainess because I thought kindness could change her. She rewrote the world because she thought control could protect me. We had each mistaken a tool for love. I used kindness to manage her, while she used authorship to secure me. Both of us were wrong. Kindness without accountability becomes permission. Love without freedom becomes authorship. And a perfect ending chosen by only one person is still a prison. Accountability required accepting that good intentions could still injure people whose consent had been ignored. Evelyn never stopped fearing that I might leave. Her fear remained because healing does not erase the wound that created obsession. I never promised that I could not. Instead, I kept choosing to return. My return remained meaningful because I never surrendered the right to make a different choice later. That choice frightened her more than certainty ever had, because it had to be earned again each day. It also made her happier. Daily choice was less comforting than destiny, but it allowed trust to grow from evidence instead of magical certainty. The first ending she never controlled was not our wedding. A crown? A prophecy? Or a sentence written by magic? It was an ordinary evening when I came home late, opened the gate myself, and found her waiting without guards, trackers, or rewritten roads. Nothing about that evening looked important enough for a novel, which was exactly why it belonged entirely to us. She asked why I had returned. She asked because she still feared the answer might reveal another hidden force directing my steps. I gave her the only answer the old story had never allowed. Because I wanted to. The truth required no prophecy, no revised memory, and no promise beyond the moment in which I spoke it.